Hi everybody, so today we're going to be talking about prolactin as well as a little bit about lactation. So let's go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the role of lactation. The role of prolactin. So prolactin is going to have two different roles when it comes to the body. The first one is that prolactin is going to be responsible for producing milk. Okay, and this is going to be in a pregnant woman. Okay, so it's going to produce milk. And the other thing that prolactin is going to do is it's going to be responsible for breast development. And it's going to do the breast development along with estrogen, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now. And what you're looking at here is the brain, and this is the front part of the brain. I didn't draw like the frontal lobe and all that because I needed some room. But this would basically be where your hypothalamus is. And in your hypothalamus, you actually have a nucleus, which we call the arcuate nucleus. Okay, and we're going to talk right now about what happens when a woman is not pregnant. Okay, so when a woman is not pregnant, what's going to happen is this arcuate nucleus is going to release a hormone that we're going to call prolactin inhibitory hormone. Okay, and this is known as PIH, or it's also known as dopamine. Okay, so what's going to happen is the hypothalamus is going to release this dopamine. The dopamine is going to come down and it's going to enter into what we call the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal. This here is the hypothalamic hypophyseal portal right here. Okay, this here is going to be my pituitary gland. This is my anterior pituitary. This is my posterior pituitary. This is the infundibulum. So this dopamine now is going to travel down from up here and enter into this system, and then it's going to be released. Now, if you see these cells right here, we're going to call these cells lactotrophs. And lactotrophs are responsible for making prolactin. But as you can see, the hormone that's released when someone's not pregnant is prolactin inhibitory hormone. So what's going to happen is this prolactin inhibitory hormone, or also known as dopamine, is going to come down this hypothalamic hypophyseal portal, and it's going to go to the lactotrophs. Now, on the lactotrophs, there is a receptor, and we call this a D2 receptor. And when this dopamine comes out, it's going to bond onto this receptor, and what it's going to do is it's going to prevent this lactotroph from making prolactin. So it's going to decrease prolactin production. Okay, and that's what the dopamine is going to do. Now again, that's if someone's not pregnant. So let's say now someone does get pregnant, right? Here's what's going to happen if someone does get pregnant. Also up in here, in the hypothalamus, we have another nucleus, which we are going to call the paraventricular nucleus. Okay, this is going to be my paraventricular nucleus. And what's going to happen with this paraventricular nucleus is it's going to release a hormone that we're going to call TRH. TRH is known as thyrotropin releasing hormone. Now this is going to have the opposite effect. And what thyrotropin releasing hormone is going to do is it's going to travel down into here, and it's going to come down and it's going to bond onto another receptor down in here on these cells. It could also be on this cell here, right? And when it comes down and bonds onto here, it is going to increase the production of prolactin. So now we're going to increase the production of prolactin. Okay, so now we're going to start to produce prolactin. Now, before I go on, there's one more thing I want to say is that when a woman gets pregnant, they're going to have a baby development. They're going to produce something called the placenta, which is the covering around the baby. Okay, so if this is my baby here, right, and let's say this is the placenta right here, the placenta can produce a hormone which we are going to call chorionic somatomamotropin hormone. It's a lot of words. We're just going to abbreviate this with something called HCS. So that's chorionic somatomamotropin hormone. And what it can do is it can enter into the bloodstream, go up to these lactotrophs, and it can also stimulate the production of prolactin. So it's going to come up here, and let's just say I'm going to go out like this. And what's going to happen now is this would be my HCS. And now I'm going to get an increase in prolactin. Prolactin is actually the abbreviation is PRL. That's a little easier to write. Okay, so now that's what's going to happen. So as this occurs, as the pregnancy goes on, what's going to happen is if I draw just a little graph here, the amount of prolactin is going to increase. So from about the 5th week of pregnancy, the amount of prolactin starts to increase. And then by the time a baby is born, there's about 10 to 20 times more prolactin than when the woman's not pregnant. So this is going to increase by about 10 to 20 times as the pregnancy goes up, okay? And we're going to talk about some things that are going to stimulate this stuff in a little bit also when it comes to supplements. So now, let's take a look at what's going to happen and what prolactin does. So from here, my prolactin is going to come out and it's going to enter into the bloodstream. So let's just say this is my bloodstream here, right? And I'm just going to draw this going up like this. And let's take a look at some things real quick. So right here, we're looking at a breast, right? And these are the mammary glands that you see right here. We're going to call these lobules. So the mammary glands is going to be made up of something called the lobule, right? And then inside the lobule, we're going to have these cells, which we're going to call alveoli. All right, so I'm going to go like this, and then there's my alveoli, or alveolar cells, right, if you want to call it that, and there's an example of one right there. So you can see that's all on the inside there. We're also going to have some ducts in here, and these ducts are going to come together, and they're going to form something called lactiferous ducts. Right here. Now, I've seen books that just call the whole thing the lactiferous duct, so in this case, I'm just going to call this the lactiferous. And then this right here, as milk is produced, it's going to be stored in this sinus here, which we're going to call the lactiferous sinus. Okay? So, let's take a look. So this is going to be my alveolar cell, right? That's the alveolar cell. And that's going to be it. So what I've done here is I've drawn an enlarged version of this. So let's just say I took this portion right here and I've enlarged it to be this right here. So once again, I'm going to have my blood coming by, and in my blood, I am going to have the hormone prolactin. So here's my prolactin right here. And what prolactin is going to do is it's going to leave the bloodstream and it's going to bond onto a type of receptor here. This is known as a tyrosine kinase receptor, okay? It's a category of it, okay? This one in particular is going to be called a Kinase kinase, which we know as Jack, right? And then what's going to happen is when this PRL bonds onto this, it's going to have an effect on this, and it's going to cause phosphorylation. So what's going to happen is phosphates are going to start to bond to this, right? And it's going to activate this. And then what this is going to do is this is going to go over to another molecule, and it's going to cause the activation of this other molecule, which I am going to call STAT. Okay, so STAT now is going to become phosphorylated. Okay, and as this becomes phosphorylated, what it's going to do is it's going to go over to the nucleus, right? And in the nucleus, it's going to cause the production of something called mRNA, messenger RNA, right? So this is going to go over here. It's going to cause the activation of this, and then what's going to happen is we're going to make something called messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is going to go to the ribosome, and if you recall, your ribosome is going to make proteins, right? So your ribosome is going to make proteins. Now, the type of proteins it's going to make in this case is, it makes several different proteins, but the ones we're concerned about is something called lactalbumin and another one called casein. Now, these are going to play a role. And by the way, these can be produced by the endoplasmic reticulum also. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum can make those also. So this is what this is going to do. These proteins are going to play a role. The reason you make this is because they're going to provide amino acids in the milk. So now that we started making these proteins, what the proteins are going to do is they are going to come over to receptors, and they are going to cause the phosphorylation of receptors. And then, because it causes the phosphorylation of these receptors, I am going to get some ions coming into the into the cell, right? So ions would be like, I'm gonna get potassium, I'm gonna get calcium, I'm also gonna get chlorine, and those are gonna start entering into the cell so they can be inside the milk. The other thing that's gonna happen is we're also going to start to get osmosis from the interstitial fluid, right? Because we need some fluid in this milk. So we're gonna start to get some osmosis, which means water is gonna start now entering into the cell. The other thing that's gonna happen too is that the mother's gonna have antibodies called immunoglobulins, right? So we're gonna get immunoglobulins, especially immunoglobulin A is also, this is gonna be phosphorylated, it's also going to enter into this cell also. So eventually so now I have immunoglobulin A, I have my osmosis going on, so I'm getting water coming in from the interstitial fluid. I have these ions coming in, right? All coming into the inside of the cell. So eventually what's going to happen now is after this is all put together, it's going to be forced out into this area in here, right? So we're going to force all this out, and then the milk is going to be stored inside the lumina of the alveolar cell. So milk is what I wanted, right? Okay. So anyways, that's that there. Now let's take a look of something else that's going on here. Now let's say after the baby's born. Wait, before the baby's born, there's a few things that's going to happen. Our estrogen, like we said, the estrogen is going to be responsible for breast development. So I'm going to get an increase in estrogen and in progesterone. Okay, now in a mother who is in her childbearing years, the type of estrogen we're going to have is something called estradiol 2 in her childbearing years, right? Estradiol 1's after menopause. So anyways, so here's what's going to happen now is a few different things. We have all the prolactin going on. These two during pregnancy are going to prevent milk production. So, I'm sorry, milk secretion. So milk is going to be being produced, right? But they're going to prevent the milk from being secreted. So they decrease milk secretion while the mother's pregnant. Okay, so now the estrogen and progesterone are going to decrease milk secretion, but then after a baby is born, the amount of estrogen and progesterone decrease, and now milk can start to be secreted. Remember, it's not interfering with the amount of prolactin being produced, it's interfering, or the amount of milk being made, it's interfering with the secretion of the milk. So now the baby's been born, and now what's going to happen is these are going to decrease, all right? They're going to decrease, and now milk can start being produced. Now at first, a few days before pregnancy, or before the pregnancy ends, before the baby's born, and till a few days after the baby's born, basically what's produced is something called colostrum, okay? And colostrum, it's like milk, but it doesn't have the fat, so there's no fat in this, okay? So anyways, that's what's going to happen with the estrogen and progesterone. Now, one other thing is this estradiol, which is still going to be remaining. Remember, it decreases. It doesn't go away. It decreases. What it's going to do is it's going to make these lactotroph cells more sensitive to the TRH and less sensitive to the D2, right? So it's going to increase the amount of sensitivity of TRH and decrease the sensitivity of the D2 receptor to dopamine. All right, so now what's going to happen is because of the fact that we decrease the sensitivity of dopamine and increase the sensitivity of thyrotropin releasing hormone, we will also start to produce more milk. All right, so this will decrease D2 sensitivity. Actually, let's just say decrease dopamine. Okay, at the same time, it's going to increase thyrotropin releasing hormone, the sensitivity of the lactotrophs, okay? So that's the role that these are going to play. And then again, estrogen and progesterone are also going to help with the breast development during pregnancy. So let's go over here and take a look at something else real quick. And what I want to do now is we want to talk about what happens once the baby starts suckling. Okay, so now let's look at the effect that suckling has on prolactin release, okay? So this here is a breast, right? And we've already talked about this. These are going to be my mammary glands, which have lobules. Now, the way I make it look is that it doesn't take very many of these to make up a lactiferous duct, but it actually takes about 15 to 20 of the lobules to make one lactiferous duct. So let's say a baby now is going to suckle on here, okay? And a few things are going to happen. So one of the things that's going to happen is a nerve impulse is going to be sent to the spinal cord, okay? And this here is going to be my spinal cord, right? So this is my spinal cord. And I'm going to get this is going to travel, it's going to be an afferent impulse, right? So it's going to travel towards the brain. So this is going to start traveling up towards the brain. And what it's going to do is it's going to go to the arcuate nucleus, which we've already talked about before, right? So there's my arcuate nucleus. And the arcuate nucleus, like we've already mentioned before, is going to secrete dopamine. And we said dopamine is prolactin inhibitory hormone. Remember I said it comes down through here and it goes to the anterior pituitary and it stops the release of prolactin. So this is not going to be secreted now. If that's not secreted, it can't stop the release of prolactin, and prolactin is going to continue to be released. So here's what happens is as the prolactin is released, it's going to cause milk production. And this is going to last for about 1 to 2 hours after the baby sucks on the nipple, right? So we're going to get an increase in prolactin from suckling, right? Increased prolactin or an increase in milk production. Okay, and it's going to be about a 10 to 20 times increase in the milk production that's in there, and it basically gets the nipple ready or the breast ready for the next time that the kid goes to eat, the baby goes to eat, right? Then these levels are going to drop. Okay, so if we were to go like this, and the first thing I want to do is just look at the amount of prolactin in a woman who is not pregnant. But like we said before, what happens when they get pregnant, the prolactin levels go up, and then what's going to happen is when you have suckling. So now let's say the woman's pregnant and the prolactin levels go up, right? Now, let's say that a baby breastfeeds, that the amount of prolactin is going to increase, the amount of milk is going to increase, right, by about 10 to 20 times over when she's not pregnant. The thing about that is when it comes back down, it doesn't go down to that original level. It comes down to this already increased level that is there. So let's go on and look at what else is going to happen. I'm also going to get a nerve impulse that's going to come back from here, and it's going to travel up into the hypothalamus also. I'm going to draw it back here, so it's not exactly going to look like the hypothalamus. But back in here, we have the supraoptic nucleus, and we're going to have the paraventricular nucleus. Okay, so there's 2 more nuclei that are in here, and they're going to release a hormone that we are going to call oxytocin. So they're going to secrete something called oxytocin, right? And the difference between oxytocin and like dopamine and other things we talked about is oxytocin is going to come down into the posterior pituitary gland, which is right here. So this is my posterior pituitary. And if you recall what we said about the posterior pituitary gland is it doesn't make any hormones, it just stores them. So this is going to be stored, but what's also going to cause the oxytocin to be released and go into the bloodstream. So now, here's what's going to happen is we are going to look at just one of these cells here. So I'm going to take out this little alveolar cell right here, and I'm going to draw it right here. Now I don't have it drawn in there, but surrounding this cell, we actually have something that we call myoepithelium. Okay, and this is going to be myoepithelium. Okay, so there's my myoepithelium, right? And on the myoepithelium, I am going to have a receptor. So let's draw a receptor on here. All right, and that's my receptor that's on the myoepithelium. And so as my oxytocin comes down, it bonds to this myoepithelium. Okay, I also have the myoepithelium. It's going to be in these ducts. And so what's going to happen now is these muscles will squeeze, and these will squeeze also. And what they actually do is they actually shoot the milk out of here. Most people think the baby just sucks on there, and they suck the milk out like a straw, which I may have mentioned already. But what happens is the milk's actually shot into their mouth. Now, we call this the letdown reflex. Okay, so that's going to be called the letdown reflex, where this is shot into the baby's mouth. Now, one other thing I want to mention that doesn't really have to do with prolactin release, but one other thing I'm going to mention is we're going to have another hormone that's going to come along, and let's use blue. All right, so we get an impulse that comes here, and it's going to go up, and this is also going to go up to the arcuate nucleus, but it's going to go over to another nucleus, which we are going to call the preoptic nucleus. And what these are going to do is normally these will release a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone, or GnRH. And this usually comes down into the anterior pituitary gland and causes cells in here to release follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Well, as a baby suckles on the nipple, this impulse will actually stop the release of this gonadotropin releasing hormone. And when it stops that, let's go like this and just draw it like that. When it stops that, these are not released, and then what that does is that decreases the ovarian cycle of a woman's cycle. So anyways, that's one other thing. So in this way, she won't be releasing more eggs. All right, that's it for the for prolactin and basically lactation. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will catch you next time.